Right. Hey, thank you once again for the invitation to come over here. As I always say, I try to get here once a semester, once in the spring, once in the fall. And it's a busy day. I'm going to review kind of where we are with some Climo so far this year and this fall, and obviously talk about the current and upcoming weather. If time allows, at the very end I have a little write-up. We're not going to go through the entire thing. It's a Word document. But I'm going to, if anybody is a hunter or anybody is, hunting season, deer season is a big thing in Pennsylvania. The schools are closed away from the cities on the opening day of deer season, always that Monday after Thanksgiving. So I have some interesting tidbits about how weather affects deer hunting. So we'll start off with some Climo stats here. Obviously, it's been a very, very wet year.
If you click the bottom one, it won't come up with the next time it pops up.
Okay. It's been a very, very wet year. We are currently, this was yet last evening when I was doing this prep work for the PowerPoint here, we were over 56 inches, and according to Bill, we are at 56, 52 right now for the year. Our all-time record that we're shooting for, I say we're this close, let's go for the record. I'd hate to get within a tenth of an inch and we don't get it. It's like, it's been so wet, let's just do it and do it up big time. 59.30, 1996, that's the target that we have to get to by the end of the year. So like I said, let's go for that record and then some. Some interesting stats on temperature departures. I looked, remember how, and again, this year has been so weird how, like back in the spring, it seemed like winter was never going to end. It was just staying cold, 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 and then boom, you flip the switch, you got into May, and we were like 6 or 7 degrees above normal. It's like it went right into early June type weather. Where do I have to click here? Right this
The bottom one says
yep, that
current colors.
On the screen, the third option.
Oh, okay, yes. Now we're good. I'm a Mac guy. I'm not a PC guy. All right, so temperature departure. Again, going back into the spring, it was how it evolved, and then of course the summer, and then it seemed like it was endless summer here earlier in the fall. Like it's mosquitoes everywhere and high humidity, and it was just crazy. Early October, it seemed more like the middle of August. So if you went from September 1st to October 11th, the temperature departure during that period was more than 6 degrees on the plus side. However, since October 11th up through a day or two ago, we're running 3.6 degrees below normal. So we really have kind of reversed things. And actually, if you just look at the past several days, if you look at the 9th, 10th, and 11th of this month, the temperature departure here over those 3 days was 11.2 below, so quite impressive for this time of the year. We did get our first measurable snow, 0.2 so far, 0.2, just happened this past weekend. And I looked at last year, did a little comparison. Last year, actually it wasn't that much different, a little bit off. It was the 19th, and we had 0.3 last year for our first measurable snow. Okay. Any reason why we're not moving? Okay, very good. Here's our brief overview, just kind of a quick, before we start digging into some of the maps and charts and everything. Big picture, we're in a cold pattern, below normal temperature pattern. We're going to stay that way, it looks like, for the next week to 10 days or so, out through Thanksgiving week. It's obviously stormy this week, then it looks quieter, keep our fingers crossed, quieter and drier for Thanksgiving week. Get into a little bit of a respite there. Today we're still noticing the residual effects from storm number 1, which is exiting now. I think as of noon, that low pressure system was off the Jersey shore south of Long Island, and that'll be heading northeastward and away from us. Storm number 2, that's due to arrive on Thursday. And that one looks nasty, cold, potentially very wintry. And just a little comparison of the two storms. This first one was mostly a northern branch system, a little bit of a handoff from the southern branch, some energy that kind of fed into that, and then it got sheared away. But in the process, it left behind a good chunk of that energy in the southern branch to the southwest. And that's what's going to be coming out for storm number 2. That's totally southern branch energy with that second storm. And the whole thing will be lifting out toward us. And that is going to be a closed upper level low. And it's going to be combining with an air mass that's pretty cold in place. It's going to be colder than what was in place before this storm came last night, late yesterday and last night. So we'll just start with some charts. Again, we'll just run through these very quickly to kind of see where we are in the upper levels. We'll start up above and work our way down. This was this morning's 250 millibar winds, and you could certainly see the jet streak, nice jet streak, heading across, heading into the St. Lawrence Valley toward northern New England. You're in that right rear quadrant jet, and then you have a lot of other energy there, that new piece of energy diving down through the Canadian prairies. Our 500 millibar today, as I was saying, if you could kind of see what's going on here, I'm not looping this, but you can sort of envision there's your northern branch, and that's going to shear across over the next 24 hours. There's that little arc, that little piece of energy and vorticity that feeds into that, and then it gets sheared off. But the main piece of this energy is being left back, Texas. There's your 700 millibar. Obviously, you can see where the moisture is, where the whole stream of moisture is. And then you've got another patch of mid-level moisture heading southward, southeastward. Your 850s, the red line there is your zero line at 850. Pretty obvious where the cold air, where the very cold air is, that pool over south central Canada. This was this morning, a couple of hours ago, this was actually 13Z. That low has since now moved a little bit closer to the south shore of Long Island. It's moved to northeast a little bit. But you can see all the cyclonic curvature around there. This time of year, my rule of thumb, get to November, you get to this time of year, late fall, around here. If there's any doubt on sky cover, just lean toward clouds. And like 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, you're going to be right. And this was a case too, and even east of the mountains, it's staying pretty cloudy today. You don't have a strong west or northwest downsloping flow, at least not yet. You've got a lot of cyclonic flow, and that's why you're keeping a lot of clouds in place today. And that was just a snapshot of the radar from earlier with the precip from storm number 1 pulling away to the northeast. You still have some hangback moisture in here, and over time you'll start to see a growing area down in this area over the next 36 hours or so. Pretty obvious, there's all the clouds, some breaks. Looks nice down in Florida, looks nicer out west, but it's part of the country, lots and lots of cloudiness. Our surface plot, you can see, and again, you can see where this chilly air, just all, temperatures in the low to mid 30s. You got some maybe 40s showing up east of the mountains, but you can kind of see here where the warm air did get in to the coastal plain. I believe that's a Wildwood WWD airport down in Cape May County. It's actually 61 degrees, 62 degrees as of earlier this morning. Now has since the wind has gone westerly or northwest, and that's come down. And you could also see how Long Island and southeast New England got into some milder air out ahead of that storm. Here's some graphics. Now we'll kind of start with, again, looking ahead to the general picture on Thursday into Friday for the northeastern part of the country. This is a graphic we just did up at AccuWeather. I think we finalized it. The one guy finalized this probably about an hour and a half ago, maybe. Early thoughts, obviously these lines are likely to change some as we get more guidance in over the next couple of days, but we kind of have our 1-inch line like literally just outside of New York City, just outside of Philly. Pretty much we have figuring down to the I-95 corridor, there's going to be coatings. And then here it's, we could be 3 to 6, we could be 2 to 4, we could be 4 to 8. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But there's certainly a lot of potential with this, and it does look like it's more of an inland type setup as opposed to the coast. Starting times, again, very general starting times every 6 hours. Having a conversation with Bill earlier, and anybody that has kids, what are the schools going to do around here on Thursday? I'm kind of thinking that first flakes, first ice pellets, first precip is like after 10 or 11, something like that. So is it do they get the kids in and feed them lunch and ship them home in an early dismissal? Do they really be cautious and just, it's the first one of the season, and so just not even send them to school? I don't know. We have a tough enough time predicting the weather, let alone trying to figure out what the local.
Well, the other thing is how long does this last? Does it screw up things for Friday morning?
Friday morning, I suspect that there'll be enough lingering effects. It might be with cleanup and everything, probably a delay. That would be my prediction. I actually feel more confident about that forecast. I have no idea what they're going to do Thursday. So these are some general times for starting of the precip. You can see, obviously, it's going to impact. You get down into the DC and Baltimore area, it's especially DC, it's affecting the morning commute. But by the time you get to, you get Philly, it's probably it's close, maybe toward the tail end. But New York City, we're really looking at more of a, for the evening commute, for the impact up in that area. Our 5-minute millibar, I'm going to do a couple of snapshots here, and this is the feature to really hone in on here. This is as we call it, a chew ball that's coming out from the southern branch. This is a healthy looking system. That's where it is 12Z Thursday, frogged by the European. There is where it is at 0Z Friday, and these are all European based. But just focus on here in central Pennsylvania. This is a pretty good track, with it kind of cutting underneath it, Pennsylvania like that. It looks like it does open up some. It doesn't stay as a closed low. So that's one factor we're going to have to think about. Good rule of thumb, if you have a closed low that maintains its entity and maintains its strength, or it strengthens over time, they're the ones you really have to watch out for. I mean, they're the ones that QPF could go bonkers, and the models sometimes don't handle that. This thing is opening up some, so that does, you have to factor that in, and it may not be extreme in a case like that because it is opening up. But it's a nice system. It's a nice, nice sure wave. Couple of, we're going to do NAM, GFS, and we're going to kind of do that snapshot there for that critical time. Thursday evening, 0Z, Friday, 7 p.m. This was the earlier NAM. 12Z is in now. When I did the PowerPoint, still working off the 6Z. But you can see, there's your low pressure system, probably close to Elizabeth City or Virginia Beach, thereabouts at 0Z. And you've got your precip shield, and you've got this funky looking, probably some kind of mixed precip zone that's over us at that time. There's your GFS, again, same time step. Notice with the GFS is the center, of course, you have to really do a zoom in and do every millibar analysis on this, but it does look like the center of the low might be a little bit farther east, maybe a little offshore on the GFS versus the NAM, which could mean a colder solution. That's right. And then for the same time, again, 0Z Friday, that's the European. And that is very close to, did the comparison side by side, it seems like the NAM and the Euro are very close on the position of the low of the surface. Notice the northern high, and that's something too to note. Yes, we do have pretty cold air mass in place. Yes, the track of the high is a little farther north than this past one, but you still have a case where the high is going to drift offshore. It's not going to hold its ground like up over Quebec or northern Maine and keep ridging down. It tries to, it does ridge in some, but it is going to exit the scene. The center of the high does look like it drifts, eventually gets out into the Maritimes and then offshore. So that could have some bearing on the whole cold air damming and everything. I got some gridded numbers from some of the models, and this is from the NAM. We get a 60 run of NAM, and really want to focus on the Thursday. This is impressive. Look at those the 2 meter temps that are forecast by the NAM here on Thursday afternoon and evening. That's cold. I mean, 18Z minus 5.1 Celsius. 850s obviously are coming up some during that period. You know, minus 2.1, minus 0.8. So there's obviously some warming going on aloft, which we would expect. Your thicknesses, kind of in that dicey range. You know, 543. 544, 546. When I see 546, but I'm also seeing, you know, that kind of those temperatures. That is telling me very unlikely it's going to be at that time. It's very unlikely to be snow. It could be sleet, maybe freezing rain. You'd have to look at the soundings more. That definitely looks more of a sleet situation. And look at the QPF. That's impressive. 6 hours from 18Z to 0Z. 6 hours. Over 6/10 of an inch, based off of the earlier run of NAM. So I suspect it could really be thumping and going nuts here Thursday afternoon and getting quite messy in a hurry. So here's the GFS. Again, the earlier run of the GFS. I haven't checked the 12Z, but similar, not quite as extreme on those temps, but all below freezing, and very likely it probably stays below 30 here on Thursday. Your 850s, kind of a little bit colder actually, and that makes sense. Remember where the GFS was, where the surface low was a little bit offshore. So these 850s actually look a little bit, they don't look quite as warm as what the NAM looked like. There's minus 3.5, minus 2.3, minus 0.3, and your thicknesses are just a tinge lower here. Your QPF, on the other hand, you're not getting as much forcing. Maybe the low is a little farther away, and so one leads into the other. So your QPF is not, it's more spread out, and it's not as impressive as the NAM is looking. My rule of thumb, I know the NAM is an old one. You could bash it, and there's times it's totally clueless and it's out to lunch. But that model, once you're within 24 hours, 36 hours maybe, but certainly within 24 hours, you got to respect that model, because sometimes it really catches on to things. It's a higher resolution model, and there are times when it really does score some victories. And so that NAM, at this time tomorrow, if it's leaning in one direction or another, I would definitely, you know, weigh that in more heavily than right now. Now it's food for thought, it's discussion material. In 24 hours from now, I would really start respecting the NAM a lot more. Here's the Euro, the 0Z run of the Euro. And again, focus on those 2 meter temps. They're all cold. They're in that, you know, suggesting it's at or below 30, probably below 30 all day. Your 850s are kind of in that range, maybe closer to the GFS. They're certainly not as warm as what the NAM is showing. The QPF, you're still, if you had to pick, you know, again, focusing on Thursday, it's still saying that's a decent amount of precip in that 18Z to 0Z time frame, but not as much as the NAM. Then it backs off some, and then notice what it does. It's almost like there's like a backlash going on, like the back end of this thing could be impressive here, and that could lead to the whole Friday thing. If this is right, and it's still snowing, or it just got done snowing or precipitating and it's around freezing, that could be a major issue then for the Friday school situation around here. Now, I picked a couple of soundings, and I did a 21Z Thursday and then 0Z Friday, off of the Euro and off of the NAM. And so Doesn't take rocket science. That's pretty simple, basic meteorology. Look at that sounding. What kind of precip is falling? Looks like a snow sounding to me. That's at 21Z. That's at 4 p.m. Again, if that's right, assuming it's right, that's for sure a snow sounding. Now, look at that sounding 3 hours later. Notice how that little nose, that warm nose, is poking its way in there, up around between 700 and 800 millibar. That's kind of a classic, to me, that's a classic sleet look. When it starts, that's around the level you usually see the warm air coming in above 850. Usually it's 800, 780, 750, around in there. But that's telling me that that's probably transitioning over to sleet, or it has transitioned to sleet. And it's interesting if you look at the sequence of the soundings on Thursday morning when it's still dry. There's a nose in there that's at or just above freezing, up around 800 or 700. But then with the wet bulbing and cooling, the whole sounding shifts over and then it goes to. So it could be that maybe it starts off as there are some ice pellets initially, some snowflakes and ice pellets, whatever, and then boom, it goes to snow, and then you start mixing with, and it changes over to sleet. Maybe you have a fairly good duration where it's sleeting. Now let's look at the NAM. Again, kind of a similar idea. There's 21, there's 18Z. And you look at there, that's a snow sounding. Now you go to 0Z, and again you're getting that funny business going on there, right around above 850, from 850 to 800 or so. There's you're in that range there. You're above freezing. There's a above freezing layer in there. Look at all that east southeast wind blowing in there. But that's telling you that it's sleeting at that time. So as far as the forecast goes, at this juncture, again, this is still up for grabs. This is a fluid situation, and there's a lot can change over the next day or two, things to watch. But the rest of today, obviously, we're dealing with the leftovers from the first storm. So call it cloudy, mostly cloudy. The breeze is picking up on the backside of this departing low. Maybe a spotty shower too. I don't think there's going to be much. Temperature's just getting above 40 for tonight. Evening sprinkle, flurry around. Otherwise, just a lot of clouds, mostly cloudy. The soundings still look pretty moist through most of the night tonight. There are some breaks, but they look like they keep a lot of moisture around. Brisk and colder, that colder air coming in the backside of this, and then there's a high out in the Midwest, down to 26, and then we're going to keep it in the 30s tomorrow, a dry day. For the rest of the work week, tomorrow's the best day. It's cold, but it's dry. There'll be some sunshine. There might still be some Q, leftover stuff, and then there'll also probably be some cirrus around. So it's not a bright sunny day, but it's a nice day, all things considered. 35 for a high. And then for Thursday, I'm going to call it mostly cloudy. Obviously, it's a cold day. Snow and sleet arriving. My timing is, I'm looking at, I doubt that it does anything before 15Z, which is 10 o'clock morning now. Maybe it's after 11. Certainly by noon, it's doing something here. So it's 10 to noon. If the soundings, if all the indications are right, it's probably going to go to all snow. It will likely be all snow for a while. The question is it 1 or 2 hours? Is it going to be like 4 hours? And that's really critical. The intensity of the precip, when it's snowing, how long it snows, I think will go a long ways in determining how much we actually get accumulation-wise here. And then, again, all indications now is that with that warm nose poking in here later in the day, or certainly by evening, it's going to go back to sleet later in the day. And then, could there be back-end stuff like overnight, during the overnight hours on Thursday night, early Friday morning? That's possible. Sometimes you look for that to happen and it just doesn't. And it just peters out. There's just some flurries at the end. Accumulation-wise, if you had to do, we could do real vague, more general wording at this point and talk about a few or several inch accumulation, that's okay. Is it 2 to 4? Kind of think we get at least a couple inches of snow and sleet. Now the low end, anybody here think we're going to get an inch or less? I think we got a pretty good consensus that we'll at least get close to a couple of inches here, low end. So maybe 2 to 4 is a conservative, 3 to 6 might be better. If you're really a monger, you want it to snow and that warm layer never shows up, then all bets are off. Maybe we end up with 8 or 10 inches. I guess that's not impossible. I wouldn't want to rule something like that out. I think it's going to be like a 3 to 6 might be a good place to be right now, maybe 2 to 4. Either way, regardless of the actual amounts, I think for those who have to travel Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and let's face it, most people don't have snow tires on yet. I know I don't. You're in that mode of like shifting gears about now to put your snow tires on, and most people aren't used to driving in wintry weather. So things could be pretty interesting around here on the roadways. Cover evening commute time on Thursday. Behind the storm, we'll go with some mixed precip. Maybe it's snow, maybe it's some mixed stuff, ending in the morning early, and then just the rest of the day mostly cloudy, brisk, and chilly. So that's my forecast, and I think we still have time. Do we have time to do anything? Okay. Anybody have any questions while we get? I have another document to. How are we going to do that?
Escape in the top left.
Escape. Yeah, there we go. Anybody comments, questions on the forecast?
Yeah. How quickly do you think any residual after this one?
That's a good question, and it is early in the season. The ground is still, it's been cold lately, but the ground, it's fall. So you're going to melt from below. I think the key there, though, is, well, we saw what happened this past weekend, even with the snow squall, and in the shaded areas that lasted pretty long. There was still some visible, very recently. If you got a lot of sleet in that's really dense stuff, that's going to stick around. That's going to stay around for a while. If it were all snow, it would go faster. But if it's really dense and heavy, you got a lot of ice in there, a lot of sleet. That's kind of indestructible stuff, and it's going to last. The sun angle is low now in the shaded areas, and it's going to stay around for a while.
How significant do you think the ice is for the lower Susquehanna Valley descending into the Shenandoah area?
That's a good question, Andrew, and I think that here I think it's more sleety looking. Maybe there's some freezing rain, but it looks like the warm nose is up a little too high. To me, that looks more of a sleet sounding than a freezing rain sounding here. But you're right. There's a zone in there northwest of the I-95 corridor where it definitely is going to just go over to plain rain, and up farther north and west where it's more sleety. There is a zone in there where the cold air is going to be trapped in the low levels. There's plenty of warming going on just above the surface, and it will be more of an ice and a glaze situation. So yeah, I think that's might be a narrow strip in there, but I think that is a real concern.
I just more had a comment that I noticed some of the model runs are also after the front end thump of precipitation. Some of them are actually going with this idea that it might just do nothing for a few hours until the upper level low comes through then early Friday with some back end precipitation. So I guess I've just been sort of internally curious as to if it's get a lot of precip, then it takes a break for a few hours before doing something again early Friday, just the dry slot idea.
I could certainly see that. Now with the upper low going south of us, that's not too likely that you'll ever get into any appreciable dry tongue. That will happen maybe in Philadelphia or Delmarva. Those almost for sure you'll get into that. There'll be that surge of dry air that comes up in the mid levels east of the center, and that I think that is a case maybe up the I-95 corridor to a point. I think here, if the models are right and the upper low rolls south of here, maybe the precip does let up some. I don't know if it ever like totally shuts off. It's kind of unlikely for that to happen, but it could. Anybody else on this? How much time? We're good for?
Yeah, if you want to
Okay.
about that real quick.
Yeah. Now, I am Pennsylvania born and raised. I'm a deer hunter. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I've hunted since I was 12 years old. Deer hunting season is big in Pennsylvania. Like I said, the schools are off. Even our garbage collector, they come on Mondays, but they won't be there that Monday. It's like any other day, if it's 4th of July or whatever, Monday they'll collect garbage. They're not going to be there Monday, so Saturday is our garbage day. So anyway, a couple of things, like if you're, temperature as far as hunting, deer hunting, late season. Obviously, you don't want it to be bitterly cold. If you're standing, posting, you're a lot of downtime where you're not moving. So obviously, you don't want it bitter cold. But a deer generally don't move around as much when it's warmer, and so you kind of strike a balance. I mean, if I had my choice, I'd like it maybe in the upper 30s, somewhere in the 40s or so. But the whole thing, if it's really warm, oh yeah, it's great, it's nice out, real warm, taking a nap in the woods. But if you happen to get a deer, then on those days you got to rush, you got to get that to the butcher shop, you got to get that cooled down, because then you run the risk of having spoiled meat if it's too warm for too long of a period of time. They actually deal with that, like in Texas, some southern places where they have to get the deer to a shop quickly and get it cooled down. Precip, I mean, the absolute worst case scenario, like I said, is to be out there in a soaking rainstorm. Unless you have a roof over your deer stand or something, it's just miserable. It's absolutely, you just can't stay dry. It's just a totally miserable situation. If I had a choice, I'd rather it be 15 degrees with a wind blowing and dry than 45 degrees in a soaking rainstorm. So and during a rainstorm, the deer are not going to be moving around. Hunters are not going to be out pushing, so they're going to bed down. They're not dumb. They're going to bed down and kind of hunker down during a rainstorm anyway. Snow, if it's snowing lightly, that's not bad. If it's snowing too hard, then you can't see anything. The visibility is cut way back. You can't really see. So kind of best case scenario is to have it dry, actually, when you're out hunting. And I talked about snow, having snow on the ground. Think about it, some real basic stuff about having snow on the ground versus a bare ground. It's so much easier to see a deer or anything. If it's a bare ground, you're looking to see a brown animal against a brown background. It's very tough to see, and there's times deer can sneak by, you don't even see them. Unless you herd them, it's very tough to see. With snow on the ground, visibility is so much better. Tracking, if you're out like still hunting, just quietly hunting through the woods, you can see fresh tracks. That's an obvious. You can see them in mud, but way easier to see them in snow versus mud. And then the back end of things, if you did happen to get a deer, you shot, very unlikely you're going to not be able to find a shot. You're going to see some red blood in the snow. It's going to be much easier to find that deer. Sky cover, deer season, rifle season here in Pennsylvania it's after Thanksgiving. It's the sun angle is low. You don't have, your amount of daylight is very limited this time of the year. If you have a day with, thick, low overcast, you lose your shooting light early in the morning and then at the end of the day. So you only have really a certain window where, you have enough light out there on those really dim, overcast days. Having the sun out during deer season is good, but let's say you're posting in a place, you set up your stand and you're facing off to the southeast, you're up on a ridge. And in the morning, the sun comes up and it's like you got this sun right in your eyes because of the low sun angle. Or in the evening, you have your stand, you have your stand faced to the southwest. the sun's coming around, the sun's right in your eyes. So real lot of sun with a low sun angle, that's not the greatest. You know, if I had my choice, it would be some kind of a in between, like a mix of clouds and sun. It's bright enough, but it's not blinding sun. I mean, fog is a no-brainer. Fog is, that's like the absolute, that's another worst case scenario. You can't see. I mean, I remember one year back, about 10 or 12 years ago, I was on my stand and fog rolled in. I was up on top of a ridge, up Bald Eagle Ridge, just west of here. And your visibility was pretty much from here to the window. I mean, okay, you can't see anything, and it was there for like hours on end. Wind, you know, deer have a very keen sense of smell, and so your wind direction is important, you know, determining where you're going to post. And if it is very, very windy, the deer tend to get more nervous. They move around more. I've noticed that on very windy days, they tend to move around more. If you're standing, you're in your stand, the more wind, the colder it is, you got to dress for it. You know, when it's calm, and especially when it's cold and calm, you can hear every little noise. If you've ever been out in the woods, when it's quiet, when it's calm, and when it's cold, and there's no snow on the ground, crunch, crunch, you can hear a chipmunk, you know, a half a mile away. I mean, the noise just travels so well. So that's kind of, you're at an advantage that way as far as from a sound perspective. My ideal weather, being a hunter for many years, since I was 12 years old, this would be my ideal weather. This would be my choice. A dry day, more clouds than sun, temperature starting out maybe upper 20s, near 30, it peaks near 40 in the afternoon. I'd have a couple of inches of fresh snow, not like old stale snow from 2 weeks ago. I'd have fresh snow on the ground, but not snowing at the time, and then winds nearly calm. So that's my little thing on weather and deer.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. I can leave that up for reference purposes. I don't have any copyrights on that, so
Oh, yeah,
you
no
can
worries.
keep it if you want.
And that'll do it for a little bit until after Thanksgiving break. So I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday.
Thanks, Jake.
Yep, you bet.